Greetings and welcome once again to our exploration of the Viking Grand European River Cruise. This is day 7 of our cruise. This time we stop in Bamberg, Germany, and then look at the optional tour through the Franconian countryside. 7 cities down, 7 cities to go. This was another overnight trip along the winding Main with its many locks and canals. We left Würzburg the day before, shortly before dinner, and did not arrive at our destination, which was a little short of Bamberg, where we caught buses at Zeil am Main. So for the included walking tour of Bamberg, we boarded the buses, and it was about a 30-minute drive to Bamberg, where we started at the City Hall. The Regnitz River flows through the center of town, and it essentially divides the town in half. In the 14th century, the citizens wanted to build a city hall that served both sides of the town, so they built a bridge across the Regnitz and put the Rathaus, or town hall, on a man-made island in the middle. This building served the town for almost 350 years until it was replaced by the Neues Rathaus, or new town hall, in 1736. So this original Rathaus was rebuilt in 1746 with Baroque and Rococo touches added in 1756. Someone had a sense of humor as they added this three-dimensional leg to this cherub on the side of the building. The City Hall is now a museum and boasts beautiful frescoes and the Ludwig collection of porcelain and earthenware, so you should go in if you had the chance. Its location offers excellent views of the city and a colorful Little Venice area with its quaint fishermen's houses. There are a number of statues on the bridge, some of religious significance, but there's also one depicting Queen Kunigunde of Luxembourg. She was canonized by the Roman Catholic Church in 1146 and is a very popular saint in Franconia. We look up from the bridge, we can see the towers of the Bamberger Dom, or the Bamberg Cathedral. The cathedral lies in the old part of the city on a hill, and be advised it's a moderately strenuous walk up the hill, but the views of the city are worth it. In 1007, Emperor Heinrich II made Bamberg the center of the Holy Roman Empire and the capital of his reign. He wanted the city to become a second Rome, and like Rome, it is built on 7 hills with a church at the top of each hill. Both the emperor and his wife are buried in the cathedral, as was Pope Clement II, and soon Bamberg became the center of the Holy Roman Empire, and all of its bishops became princes of the land. This church is considered as a superb example of late Romanesque architecture. This is the Bamberger Horseman, a 13th century equestrian statue that is believed to be one of the first to depict a horseshoe. Next to the cathedral is the old imperial court called the Alte Hofhaltung, and on the other side of the square is the Neue Residenz and the Rose Garden, which we just took a brief walk through. The old imperial court was once home to the bishops in the 16th and 17th century, but is now a museum. The bishops finally tired of their medieval digs around 1600 and moved to a new Renaissance palace across the square, and this is called the Neue Residenz. It has a guided tour, which we were unable to take, but it takes you through 40 rooms from the 17th and 18th century. As I mentioned earlier, this is all on a hill, and it's a fairly good walk up the hill to get there, but the views of the city are certainly worth it. The Prince Bishops had it all, including this beautiful rose garden, which is worth a walk through, and you can be serenaded by this cherub. So it's back down to the main part of town with the river and the fisherman's village. There we could see lots of half-timbered houses. Bamberg was not destroyed during World War II, so many of the houses are original. While wandering around, we happened upon this luthier working on some violins. And lucky us, we came across this brewery where they had a terrific menu and the specialty of Bamberg, which is Rauchbier, which is smoked beer. This smoked beer involves roasting the malt, and it is rumored to have come about by pure chance. According to a legend, a fire in a brewery resulted in a supply of malt being engulfed in smoke, and the brewery decided to use the smoke-damaged malt to brew a beer that turned out to be unexpectedly popular. This beer is only brewed in the upper Franconia region of Bavaria, which is where Bamberg is, and it boasts the densest concentration of breweries in the world. I found the beer quite enjoyable, with a very smoky flavor, almost bacon-like. You may not have time for this, but on the way back to the train station is the Gärtnermuseum, which is devoted to the art of growing vegetables in the city in your backyard. The gardeners have used this area east of the Residenz for centuries now, when they discovered that it has a mild climate and they are able to grow many varieties from the Mediterranean. It was made known throughout Europe and was important for the sale of licorice roots. Well, that's it for the tour of Bamberg. Now we'll go back and take the optional excursion through the Franconian countryside. So while the other tours are on the buses to Bamberg, we jump on a bus and just take a short ride into Zeil am Main. Zeil is a charming little town with some beautiful half-timbered houses, but also kind of a dark past. In and around 1630, this area of Franconia was very, very close to the border with the Reformation lands. There seemed to be a lot of unbridled suspicions of other people, and hence they started having witch trials. 17th century Zeil was the place of execution during this terrible witch hunt era. Hundreds of people were burnt at the stake due to unrestrained prosecution of alleged witches within the bishopric of Bamberg. The Witch's Tower is a symbol of some of that excess. Our tour guide was full of tales of people who turned on their neighbors and reported them as witches. Such a report may have you shackled at the city hall for a couple days, or even far worse. Well, with that, we get on the buses and head to something a little more inspiring, and that's the Maria Limbach Church, just outside of Limbach. This is a tiny little church right in the middle of the countryside with not much around it, and it's also a very small church, but it was built by Balthasar Neumann, who we saw in Würzburg with the bishop's residence. This is a pilgrimage church, and it was funded by the Prince Bishop of Würzburg, who gave thanks to Our Lady of Limbach for healing his hip. This is the original organ from 1756 by the Würzburg court organ maker Johann Philipp Seufert. This monumental four-pillar canopy contains Limbach's image of grace. It shows the Mother of God standing on the crescent moon with naked baby Jesus on her arm. The Rococo side altars are just as stunning as the main altar. Now, this church is a pilgrimage church, and they think it goes into medieval times. Since the countryside is so beautiful and there are numerous bike paths around here, this is a favorite pilgrimage site for cyclists. In 2021, the church was completely renovated, and it cost about 2.3 million euros, and it was restored to its original state of its construction in 1755. There is also a very simple cemetery at the end of the church that's worth a quick stroll. Well, it was time to get back on the bus and take a little journey through the delightful countryside, skirting above Bamberg a little bit on the way to the town of Memmelsdorf, where we stopped at the Brauerei Gasthof 3 Kronen for a little snack. Here we see a little maypole, which is common in parts of Bavaria, and then we jump into the 3 Kronen for some fun. It wasn't a full meal, but only pretzels and beer, but then again, what else do you need? Without a doubt, it was a very welcome break, and the beer was good. Next, it was a very short drive from Memmelsdorf over to the parking lot at Schloss Seehof. The parking lot is very close to the Orangerie, which is where they have stored many statues of the 400 that covered the grounds that are no longer here. We started right away with a tour of the interior, and as we found with many places we visited, there's a lot of construction going on with scaffolding surrounding the structure. Since this originally was a hunting lodge, the frescoes on the ceiling depict the heavenly paradise of the gods with allegories of hunting and other amusements. In addition to the frescoes, as we have found in other palaces and places like this, there are a lot of family portraits around on all the walls. The weather was great, and it was time to get out the drone and get a view of the castle as well as the beautiful surrounding countryside. You can see Memmelsdorf just to the left of the tower. The present structure with its 4 towers was completed in 1687 by the Italian architect Antonio Petrini from northern Italy. The park today is quite different than it was when it was laid out in the early 18th century, largely because the ponds, cascades, and fountains were all drained in 1803 after the water pipe had been cut. Here you get a tremendous look at the beautiful countryside around here, and it should be noted that the lakes here were not restored until nearly 1995, and they're in their original state now. The Baroque garden was laid out more than 200 years ago, and it contained nearly 400 sandstone statues, most of which have been lost, and a few are still in the orangery. The garden layout is notable in the fact that it resembles more Dutch or Italian layouts rather than traditional French. Noteworthy along here are the 250-year-old linden trees that are planted to form a pathway. In addition to the linden trees, there are 300-year-old hornbeam hedges along this path. Well, that does it for day 7, and it's time to head back to the ship for some dinner and another overnight sail. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us out a lot.